This is a 45mm prime lens, which would make it a 90mm equivalent in full frame, but I've got loads of zoom lenses that cover this exact focal length. Why on earth would I want a prime lens that does exactly the same thing? Well, actually, there are 3 really good reasons why this lens is an essential bit of kit in my small home studio, and I'm going to share them with you, so let's get going. To help me out today, I've got the amazing Chloe. Chloe's going to be the model for this photo session, and I'm going to be using my 45mm f1.2 lens and show you 3 ways that it really excels in my small home studio. And the first one, well, that requires me to do a little bit of work, like turning off the lights. Because if you're working in low light, a fast apertured lens is definitely what you need, by which I mean a lens that lets in lots of light when there isn't much to let in. So let's try that out. So I'm going to dial in some settings. I'm going to stick with a shutter speed of 200th of a second. I'm going to go wide open, or very nearly on this lens, f1.4, and that means to get the correct exposure, I'm actually at ISO 200. And I get a picture that looks pretty good. I'm really happy with that. That's a nice looking picture, correctly exposed, looks good if I go in close. Yeah, that makes sense. But let's pretend that I didn't have this fast lens. Let's say I was using an aperture of f4. Now, if I want to maintain my shutter speed, that means I need to change my ISO. And I've just changed my aperture by 3 stops, so I'm going to change my ISO by 3 stops to balance the exposure triangle back up again. And now, well, I'm going to get exactly the same exposure and, in theory, the same picture. Except when you look a bit closer, you can see there's a little bit of noise in here, but nothing I couldn't handle. What about if I had f11 as my aperture? Lots more depth of field, but I need lots more light to compensate for that small aperture. I need another 3 stops on my ISO, taking me up to 12,800. And if I take a picture, well, it's going to be the same exposure because I've balanced my exposure triangle. And yet, when you look close, you can see the quality drop-off is huge. So if you're working in low light and you don't mind having a shallow depth of field with your wide open aperture, you really can't beat a fast lens for working in low light scenarios. Of course, if you want to work at those apertures, the alternative solution is to have lots of light, and by that I mean flash. Now, flash opens up some massive benefits to working in the studio. For a start, I can actually have all the room lights on because I don't have to worry about working with LED lights to light the studio and LED lights to light our model. Flashes are way more powerful. So let's do the same exposure again, f11, but this time I won't have to be at that crazy high ISO. I can be at my camera's native ISO of 200, and if I set everything up correctly, let's see how this picture looks with its brand new background, of course. And well, there's loads of depth of field in this picture. The thing is, that new background looks too in focus. So let's try a different aperture. Let's go down 3 stops. Now, if I change my aperture here, I need to reduce my flash power as well. So I'm going to take that down 3 stops on both the key light and the background light. And now the picture looks like this. And what we can tell from this photo is that that background is just a little bit less sharp. But those areas of less sharpness, those little bright spots, well, they're getting a little bit larger. Now, that is because I've made the aperture a bit wider than before. So the theory goes like this. If I increase my aperture even more, then those circles should become even bigger. Let's go for f1.4. It worked before, let's try it again. f1.4 does mean I need to be in something called high-speed sync flash, so the room lights don't affect my final picture. So my shutter speed has jumped up to 2.5 of a second. f1.4, ISO 200, and it looks like this. And yes, those circles are now much larger than they were before. The background is blurrier, and we call that effect bokeh, or maybe it's bokeh, or bokeh. Pop in the comments down below what you call that, because everybody has their own terminology for exactly the same effect. But that effect is a result of using a fast lens like my 45mm f1.2. But I think we should probably take a few photos like this. So Chloe, are you ready? Let's take a couple of pictures. Here we go. Honestly, it doesn't matter whether you call it bokeh, or anything else. If you want to see this effect, what you need is a background with points of light. Now, to achieve mine, I've used a sparkly fabric and a background flash. I've also set my camera to face and eye detect autofocus because with a fast prime lens wide open, a shallow depth of field is achieved, and I need all of the help I can get keeping Chloe's eyes in focus. So by now you've probably written in the comments, the one reason that most people get a fast lens like this is because it can do really shallow depth of field. That's probably the best reason for most people in a studio. So let's have a go and see how it looks. So before we get to the shallow depth of field, we'll compare it against the other two apertures we've been using. So I've got a simple setup here with a background that would look great when it's out of focus, but at f11, that's not necessarily going to be the case. And when we zoom in on the background, we can't quite read the text, but it's pretty close. So how does it compare to f4? Well, we should get a blurrier background. I've had to reduce the power of the lights to compensate for that wider aperture that's letting more of the flashlight through. It looks like this. And absolutely, those books are now a little bit softer. But that is nothing compared to a wide aperture that you get from a fast lens, like a prime lens like this. f1.4 looks like this. Now, once again, I've had to switch into high-speed sync, but that really is just a matter of pressing a button on the transmitter. In fact, it's pretty much that simple that we can take a few photos just like this. So Chloe, are you ready? Here we go. Usually I use zoom lenses, so every time I use a prime lens, the first thing I miss is, well, the ability to zoom. But I have to remember, I have an ability to zoom, it's called my feet, and if I go closer, I will get not only a zoom effect, but a shallower depth of field or a blurrier background. And if I step further back, I'll get a sharper background, not because of the lens, just because of physics. There's lots of really good reasons why having a fast prime lens is a really good idea, whether it's you want to work in low light or you want the bokeh or you want that shallow depth of field effect. But you'll notice I didn't mention things like being smaller, lighter or cheaper than a zoom lens, and that's because that might not actually be true. So check out Adorama for your full specs on any lens you're interested in. You'll find gear links to what I'm using in the video description down below. Whilst you're down there, why not click on the thumbs up button and give us a comment if you've got any questions. But more importantly, if you haven't already done so, click on that subscribe button. I'm Gavin Hoey. Thanks for watching.